Hello, hello. Here we are again, coming to you from Broadcast Team Alpha with the World Paranormal Show and everything else that we're doing out there. And my name is Aage, and my co-host Nori cannot be here tonight, but she will be back. And then we will have a lot of other fun shows to talk about. And we are coming to you from 40 plus different platforms out there. And one of them is the Conscious Awakening Network. You need to go and have a look at that platform because they have about close to 50 shows there that talks about absolutely everything that both you and me need to know about. You can find them at consciousawakeningnetwork.org, and of course also on YouTube and many other places with the same name. So before I introduce the guest again, oh, that's what I get for not shutting the phone off. Okay, I want to introduce the guest, but I also want to tell you how you can get a hold of us. You can reach me and you can reach Nori if you go to broadcastteamalpha.com, broadcastteamalpha.com, and you can send us a message from there. We'll get the email and we'll get back to you and see maybe whatever we can help you out with. And I would introduce the guest here because we have Sperry Andrews returning to Broadcast Team Alpha. And I know it got really deep the last time that we talked. And we're going to go deep this time and even deeper. He's an author, he's a lecturer, he's a teacher. And back in about 1990, he formed the Human Connection Institute. And he has spoken at hundreds of groups over the last 40 years around the world. And he is teaching, the teaching that he does, it's a distant mental interaction. And there is, he deals with living systems. And I want him to translate that a little bit once we get into the show, because he has also spoken at the University of Connecticut and the Institute, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, World Business Academies, Duke University at Berkeley, and many other universities or places of higher learning. And he also spoke at the UN. And not too many people get to do that. So in a little while, you will understand why. So, well, without any more words from me, welcome back to the show here, Sperry.
All love with you, Augie, and your audience. Thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, yeah, this is going to be fun because we talked before the show, and we talked several times over the last month or so, and you have memories that precede your birth here on Earth. And you mentioned that you had knowledge of you coming from the eighth dimension. And that is so fascinating. I've got to ask, what is that? Where is it and what is it like and what do you remember? Tell us about the higher vibrations and coming here. That will be a strange one.
Mm. Well, I would suppose all of you listening right here, right now, that you've experienced how, like a television set, you can have many channels that you can switch to. They all coexist simultaneously. They're just coming in at different vibrations or frequencies that are being pulled down through your antenna or through your Ethernet connection. And each one is incomparably unique in a sense, but we attempt to compare them, like you can see Augie and me as seen clearly in different environments. We appear differently, but a deeper level that is what we might call formless compared to our form-based physical, emotional, and mental, soulful experiences that are incomparably unique every moment. If we go to the level of just pure awakeness, which is like standing in front of our bathroom mirror, and if we try to look in whatever way to where our image is being received and reflected by the mirror, we can't find it. It's just this silver glass surface that
Yeah.
is just receiving and reflecting us very precisely, exactly as we appear in front of it. So imagine that each one of us, our awareness, our observing, our awakeness, if you will, like the mirror is, as a metaphor, is awakeness. We're each standing in front of this receptive, reflective, mirror-like awakeness, which has no form of its own. It has no mind-made version of its own, but it is ideally able to receive and reflect flawlessly and continuously. So we're each standing in our different bathrooms, and we each look different, we feel differently, the images, the imagination that we're having in response to our reflection is incomparably unique for each of us. We are incomparably unique individuals. Yet, if we were all standing in front of the same mirror, as a group of, which I've done with groups for fun, it's as though we can experience together that we're all being received and reflective instantaneously in some incomparably unique way. And we can focus on the awakeness in all of us and in ourselves that is receiving and reflecting what we're sensing and feeling and thinking individually, and actually come into a state through awareness of awareness where we share conscious awareness.
Yeah.
Where our collective awakeness, if you will, like a collective mirror-like receptive, reflective consciousness that we all can share in standing in front of the mirror, we can tune in to what it is that we're all embodying as a greater body, heart, and mind. And we can access our combined sensitivities physically, emotionally, and mentally, and psychologically, and spiritually, soulfully. So in the same way that we have bodies, we grew from being reptiles that are has sensory intelligence, that can navigate the world based on, where's something to eat, and am I going to get eaten, to over millions of years developing emotional intelligence, which is more or less our heartfelt, compared to our embodiment of sensory intelligence. So we develop this emotional and sensory intelligence where the emotional intelligence evolved like a flower evolved out of a green stem with green leaves.
Okay.
We have this flowering of ultimately of this mind-made version, which has been evolving for some time and is really still continuing every moment in us and in all of us and throughout the whole of nature. Nature has its own mind-made version. But at that level, there is no division, and there's no division in the mirror. There is a quality in all of us that we can be conscious of together that allows us all to be sensitive together consciously as a collective intelligence. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, that will reflect back to the eighth dimension, where there is a perceived individuality but a common mind. Would that be something?
That's right. It was as though we didn't have any internal organs. We weren't really very concerned visually, even though the visual was very beautiful and heavenly. It was it's
So in
hard to
other words,
describe, but it's sort of hard to describe that. It's kind of described a deep
yeah,
metaphysical communion of love and joy and play and freedom of
yeah.
spirit. But it had a
So
it was a lot like Augie when I was born through a human mother, when I agreed to come here to the third dimension, to Earth. Well, I didn't even know what a planet was. I didn't know what Earth was. And I was a little baby, less than a year old, left in the back of my parents' station wagon. And I didn't even know how to turn over. You know what babies are when they don't even know how to turn over or crawl. So I
yeah,
was lying there and I was in absolute perfect bliss. The whole of space was filled with these dazzling, sparkling, appearing and disappearing colors and abstract uh, shapes. And then the whole physical world of the interior of the car and what was outside the window was all appearing and disappearing in an incomparably unique way every moment. And it was absolutely dazzlingly beautiful. And I was very happy as a little baby, just experiencing that and embodying that and knowing that and feeling it and sensing it in every possible way as I could as a baby.
so I think then you being in the back of the car like that, being a little baby, just right after you were born, you had not totally accepted the technicalities of the physical yet. You didn't understand it, so it kind of didn't even exist yet, but you had memories and visual images of what it was before, and they were overlaying the physical existence. Could that be close?
And in the only difference between where I was in the eighth dimension in many respects was that I was sharing that quality of communion with all that is, all that I could know myself to be at the visual or emotional or sensory level. I was sharing that with all of my eighth dimensional friends who all coexist together as one incomparably unique consciousness that was individuated, but we were all of our individual uniqueness was being united like my sight and my hearing and my taste and my touch and my heart and my body are all you being united by what we would call my consciousness in some unique way, but we were doing that as a collective at the eighth dimension.
Yeah.
It was like we were one
So,
body, heart, and mind, and it was absolutely beautiful visually and kinesthetically and emotionally, but we wouldn't really look at it or think about it the way we, by any means, the way we do here. But the groups that I've done for over 40 years with tens of thousands of people here on Earth, internationally in many different countries, when we go into awareness of awareness in a fully heartfelt, embodied way, the inanimate world feels as much a part of our flesh and bones and blood and body and heart and mind as anything else that we're normally identified with. And the whole group feels that as an indivisible consciousness together. So I've been exploring that, how to bring people there as rapidly as possible, as reliably as possible for over 40 years now, through very, very, very simple guidelines where we essentially just notice the noticing. And then what we're noticing becomes orchestrated and organized by the quality of our individual and indivisible noticing as a group. And the mind goes completely silent. We feel absolutely one and indivisible with the inanimate world as though it was part of our animate psychobiology. And
yeah.
we feel all together as one. And it's absolutely exquisite. Like everybody says, Aage, they say, I never want to be any other way for the rest of my existence. Please,
Yeah.
how do you accomplish that, Sperry? Teach me how to do that. And so I've been doing what I can to teach not only everybody to come to the groups, but focus on how do you get this potential to be comprehended and embraced and understood mentally by the scientific, military, industrial, pharmaceutical,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. They're
political establishment. How do you get them to agree to come into this other way of being?
I don't think there's any place for them there. But when you were at the 8th level
I
of
think there's a place for
consciousness,
everyone and everything there, Aage.
yeah,
Thank heavens for that. You know,
yeah,
that's what's there's a heaven, actually.
yeah. But when you were at the 8th level of consciousness or the 8th dimension of existence, when you have a perceived individuality, that means that you can actually also, even though a common mind, you can also look at each other's individually. Did you appear as a light being or a ball of light, or how did you discern each other?
Well, just like what's going on in my right eye is being combined automatically and flawlessly with my left eye, as well as what I'm hearing and tasting and seeing, imagining and hoping for. It's all occurring simultaneously. And in the 8th dimension and in these groups, people would experience, not there won't be we wouldn't be so identified with the content as much as this sense of the air itself, the in the room where we're sitting and beyond the room where we're sitting. You could actually feel beyond the room. You could feel the space that the earth was floating in weightlessly, what to call
Ether?
well, there's a word for it on a mass level that the whole of humanity being awake together. You could feel that with all the bugs and leaf and creatures in your own body, heart, and mind, and every atom and molecule and cell in your own body. You could feel that sense that you were sharing with all life everywhere.
Mm.
There's no conflict. It's absolute effortless. No anything running over or canceling anything else out. It's all combined flawlessly, as the same way that the mirror receives and reflects without having an image of its own. And that's, if you had sticky notes all over the mirror, oh, I'm a this and they're a that, and he's a this and she's a this. If those sticky notes were all pasted all over the mirror, you wouldn't be able to see yourself in the mirror because you'd be so involved with these thoughts and things that are written down on these little sticky notes. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when the sticky notes are still there, but they're not occluding, they're not eclipsing the mirror-like quality that is at the very base of every moment, every point in space and time, the whole of the cosmos is actually, in our physics, emerged from that which cannot be divided, because there's no thing to divide. It continues to unite all of space-time, energy, and matter, which causes the whole of space-time, energy, matter to be incomparably unique every moment and be reconstructed, deconstructed, and represented to itself over the last 13.8 billion years. And now we have this spatial temporal dependent psychophysiological experience that we each become so overly identified, we feel lost in the forest among the trees.
Yeah. I got a question that relates to this, and that, being of light. Where does the beings of light start? We don't see them around here. I've never seen them at Kmart. Well, that dates me. Make it more Walmart. But they don't show up here. I don't never seen anything in the fifth dimensional existence either of light being. Is it from the sixth on up that they kind of live? Or is this higher?
Well, I have experienced uh, being the void with people such that they could not help but feel and sense with me as one body, heart, and mind. They're normally, in some cases, people would be absolutely terrified to even be around another human being, and yet in the presence of me as this void based, all embracing, all indivisibly one consciousness that is like a mirror, they would feel absolutely safe. In fact, this Japanese woman who had been sort of abandoned by her husband in Australia, he'd gone off to for months and months to work or something. She had a newborn baby, was all alone. She picked me up on a full moon night as a 6'2" male. She was like 5 feet or less, ground to a halt in her car just because I was hitchhiking. She rolls down her window and she said, and in a daze, she goes like, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going up to this town, which is about an hour away." And she said, "Well, I just live up the road about 10 minutes, but get in the car, I'll take you," which was 2 hours out of her way. So I get in the car, we're not speaking other than, "Where are you going?" And I said, "To Atherton." This is in northern Australia. And so we're sitting in the car together in silence, absolute silence and stillness. And she asks me, "What are you doing?" Because it seemed very bizarre. Whatever she was feeling from me, she didn't know how to make sense of it. And I didn't know how to put it into words either. But what came to me to say was, there's a feeling of being everything that I'm conscious of with you. And she took that in because of our indivisibility, and she just went into absolute stillness and silence as one consciousness, and we became one body, heart, and mind in the absence of thought, as this mirror-like awakeness, which is omnipresent and omnipotent and omniscient, in that it was omnipotent in the sense it was automatically organizing what we were experiencing together. And then the next thing she asked me, she said, "Sperry," no, she didn't say Sperry, she didn't even know my name. She said, my newborn baby, I left with a neighbor, and I'm afraid that she might do being harm to my baby. What do you sense?" Here she's asking this total 6'2" stranger at a full moon night on a deserted road, what do I feel about whether she should be worried for her baby?
Yeah.
And so I just went into the nothing, into the absence, into the oneness, into the totality. And in a few seconds, it came to me, I felt and told her, it feels to me like you don't have anything to worry about. It's okay. And she had such a sense of relief. It like was a spreading, like a wave hitting the beach or something. And it went through both of us, and we felt it together, and we became one body, heart, and mind. And when she would speak, it would come up through me, like it was coming up through my spine, up through my heart, into my mind, into my head. And I would understand and experience, and I would feel her experiencing what I was experiencing after what she just said. And then I would speak, and the same thing would happen through her, and she would feel me feeling that happen through her in the same way. It's quite extraordinary. I wrote a story about this, if anybody would like to read it. It's very short, it's about 2.5 pages.
Yeah.
So this is when I was 32 years old in Northern Australia, living in a garden shed on a non-denominational ashram in Mount Malloy, North Queensland, living in a garden shed. So I had been meditating for months, and it got to the point, this is the lead up to how I got into this state, I think is helpful. Uh, just meditating, going out in nature all day long and just being in nature and feeling, and the more calm, more peaceful, more unidentified I became, the more sensitive I became to nature. And it would just, nature would surprise me. Like suddenly, like 20 birds would like take off from within the grass and fly up into the air, chirping and everything. Or I would feel the whole universe like passing through my physical body, like it was some kind of like a breeze flowing through me. And so I got to a place where I felt like there was nothing left of me but awareness. There was no me. And it occurred to me to ask, well, it seems like whatever it is I have felt and imagined and experienced myself to be is just going to evaporate and there'll be no me. And it was kind of a little scary there, but I was in this
Yeah.
quiescent, deep place. And so I felt I want to examine this. What is this awareness? It's the only thing that's remaining. And it happened that that night I was reading Jiddu Krishnamurti in a conversation with Vivekananda in Krishnamurti's collection of talks called The Awakening of Intelligence, which is one of his books. And it was made popular in a movie with, forget his name, who was, I won't go into that right now, but it's a very beautiful book if anybody wants to read a great book, Awakening of Intelligence with by Krishnamurti and all these collection of talks. So he was talking to Vivekananda, who came to the United States, I don't know, maybe 60 years ago at this point, and he was so powerful and so powerful presence. He would talk in Chicago or New York or wherever, the United Nations, and people were very moved. That was the beginning of the whole yoga movement, I would say, in the United States. He really helped to ignite the yoga movement. And many people have said that about my work, that if sharing and experiencing this indivisible unity of consciousness in a fully heartfelt embodied way together could be like a match held to some dry brush and create this fire of illumination, like you were talking about, this awakening, this light of pure spiritual luminescence, that it would, this fire of all unconditional eternal love that is just pure golden light would just be ignited on the planet. And at that point, when I realized that, I decided this is the key. I want to spend the rest of my life figuring out how to popularize this successfully to the whole of humanity. So to continue with that story just a little bit, I said I want to follow what Krishnamurti is suggesting here, which was and what he was suggesting to Vivekananda. He says, well, I don't teach, Vivekananda would teach people yoga and techniques and ideas about who and what we are and what we can be. And Krishnamurti would say, well, I don't do any of those things. I just point to the door so people can walk up to the door and walk through the doorway into this other level of pure, unidentified, indivisible awakeness. And so how do you get there? Vivekananda would say, and Krishnamurti said, well, you just make no effort at all. So I felt like that's something would be really exciting and curious to explore. So I started doing that, and overnight, because I was meditating all the time, I didn't really need to sleep anymore. I was in a state following and exploring this ever more incrementally more effortless level of awakeness until the dawn light. I'm sort of propped up on my elbows. I have a mosquito screen around with all these wolf spiders clinging to it in this garden shed in North Queensland, Australia. And so I'm looking, staring in front of me at nothing essentially, and suddenly this ectoplasm that looks like a cloud. You know how clouds are white, but they're constantly turning and they're never the same way twice every moment. They're constantly changing form. But in this case, what appeared in front of my eyes was this sort of inky, kind of oily, brown and cream and white colored thing that was turning like a cloud. And it felt like it was an extension of something that was still within me, and it was kind of grotesque, and I felt like turning away, but I realized instantaneously that if I did that, that would be making an effort. So I kept looking at this ectoplasm spinning, and it felt like it was a projection of my own unconsciousness. Like this was a manifestation of all that I had, through effort, been avoiding being aware of. So I felt, well, that makes sense. So I kept indivisibly, effortlessly being present with it. And after about 5 or 10 minutes, it just like poof, like that, and it disappeared. And I found all boundaries dissolved, and there was all that was left of me was this void, in which birds were singing, but they felt like they were not just singing outside in the tree. They were singing inside my hand, inside my heart, inside my elbow, inside my knee. Everything was omnipresent within me.
Mm.
Now, this is long before I recalled what it was like to be in the eighth dimension, which is exactly what it's like to be in the eighth dimension. But in any case,
Yeah.
so the day went on, and I had not had any way of being mobile, and I decided, I'd seen in a paper I'd looked at that there was a used car I could afford. It was like $300 or something. And as night began to fall, I felt motivated to go out to this one road that there was on, and it was a full moon night. I felt the moon within my hand, within my heart, within my toes, within my everything that I knew myself to be. Everything was within
Mm.
everything else.
Yeah.
And I was having no thought at all. And but I was hoping to go get a car. I wasn't really thinking about it, but I could intuitively sense that it was a possibility. And at that moment, a car about a quarter mile away, with its lights on, came over the horizon. And the first thought that I had occurred to me after I had become pure void. And it was like, wouldn't it be nice if this person stopped and took me to this town where they were selling the car, which was an hour from where I was? As this car approached, I could feel the indivisibility between the driver and the car and everything else in the universe, as far as I could tell with my senses, uh, in every level of my body, heart, and mind, a cellular, biological, atomic level.
Mm-hmm.
And she drove up and ground to a halt in the dust on the side of this road, rolls down her window, and in a daze kind of looks out the window and says, "Where are you going?" And I
That
said,
was her. Yeah.
and
That was
said,
her. I
I said, I'm going to Atherton, which was about an hour away. And she said, well, get in the car, I'll take you, with a certain amount of edge of enthusiasm about it or something. So I got over there and got in the car, didn't speak a word. And that's where that conversation happened that
yeah.
I of a few moments before.
Yeah. I see now that we're just past the bottom of the hour here. So for those of you that joined us late, we're talking with Sperry Andrews. We're talking about the mysteries of the universe and some of the things that he has experienced. I asked a question before and it got kind of convoluted on me. So I'm going to ask it in reverse.
Okay.
Where are the light beings from?
Well, there's only one unified verse, let's say. Doesn't matter how it's a multiverse of countless universes. Let's say you're a universe, I'm a universe.
Yeah.
This entire Milky Way, or this universe that we think of as the one that we live in is can coexist with an uncountless number of other universes that have been appearing and disappearing, just like we're
Hmm.
appearing and disappearing every moment. Actually, right now, we can actually be aware that we are never the same way twice every single instant.
Yeah.
So there's much room for an infinite amount of variety of form, but there's only, it seems to be to this one, there's only one formlessness. There's only one void, which the meditators in the East for thousands of years have said
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
we are all the void, whether we know it or not. Namkai
Hmm.
Norbu, um, I can just keep naming them all. They all agree on that through
Yeah.
meditative intelligence.
Let, let's, I think I have an idea on that anyway, but let's, we call this the universe. Well, it's the wrong term for it in the first place. It should be the multiverse at least. But
Mm-hmm.
where did it all start? You mentioned 14.7 billion years ago. That is what quantum mechanics thought was the Big Bang. And I think now that the equations on the blackboard show that the Big Bang never really did happen, but there was a physical expression that started somewhere. Was that just consciousness that entered this vibrational existence and multiplied itself into everything we see? Or what, what is your perception of the beginning?
Thank you. Well, I've published and presented and uh, with, as I said, one of the most astounding uh, scientific historians, 850-page book if you'd like to read it, and did his work in Einstein, and we've been working together for 8 years, and we have, by combining our insights, we've come up with a theory that you can read about and called In the Beginning. That's one of our many papers. And what I showed Dr. Jim Beekler, PhD, when we first spoke, because I had read his work and so I could speak his language when I first spoke to him after a year of studying his work. I showed him, I said, Jim, take a look at this. Because we had been writing to some extent back and forth before we got together to talk online. I said, you see how every single location, every coordinate location in 3 dimensions is in fact a dimensionless point where there is no dimensionality at every point. And so all the length, width, and depth, which are just coordinate locations, are oscillating and constantly changing their separation continually in relations to each other in the same way that particles vibrate, or in the quantum mechanical level, you have this indefiniteness of the probability that they're here or there, or depending upon how it's observed. Because once you observe the quantum system, it appears to become a classical deterministic system that accords with general relativity. So the quantum mechanical picture, which is the complementary probability field of the Schrodinger equation, Erwin Schrodinger worked with Einstein to help him create general
Yeah.
relativity.
Hmm.
So, but Schrodinger was the father of quantum mechanics, and also Einstein was with Max Planck and others. So when you realize that the point that is the foundation of dimensionality at every coordinate location is not a thing, it has no energy, it has no absolute location in space or time. And so all those dimensionless points that make up 3-dimensional length, width, and depth undergoing oscillation and probability potentials, all of those points are at one level at the same point, always. And what in Jim's and my work, we call that the 4th dimension of space,
Hmm.
which James Clerk Maxwell, who discovered the quaternions that explain the whole of electromagnetism, uh, who This is before Einstein, okay? Uh, and Kaluza and Klein, and I
Yeah.
have to breathe here. There are about three other physicists that existed before Einstein presented his theory of special and general relativity. They all said that we need to have a fourth dimension of space, of just pure space, in which things can happen three-dimensionally. Without that fourth dimension of pure space, three-dimensionality of vibrations and things going here and going there, or things appearing probabilistic as in quantum mechanics, which are bookends of what we're experiencing right this moment, that without that fourth dimension being a dimension of space, that we can't even have a three-dimensional reality. And Ernst Mach, who was a very conservative physicist, said, well, if we can't measure it because it's immeasurable, there's nothing to measure,
Yeah.
it's the void, which the East has been saying for thousands of years. We are the void, whether we know it or not. In the mind, there is no mind. There is
Mhm.
no self, as the Dalai Lama said about 10 years ago. Uh, it's not, he said, Dalai Lama said, it's not about getting rid of the self. It's about realizing that there was no self to begin with.
Mhm.
And so, yes, there is a self that we have, but it is ephemeral. It's incomparably unique every moment. It is deconstructing and reconstructed and represented to the observer, to this fourth dimension of pure consciousness that is formless. That is how we're evolving right now, by what we pay attention to and how well we pay attention. So if we primarily, or almost exclusively, which is the problem here on planet Earth, we tend to exclusively almost pay attention to what we think and feel and sense, which separates us from who we were a moment before and who we might become. And so we attempt to control who we're going to become by how we pay attention. Now, that has a lot of intelligence to it, because how we pay attention and how well we pay attention
Yeah.
determines what we experience. In quantum mechanics, it actually transforms the probability field into a causal, deterministic, spatial temporal dependent structure that we experience as this, what we're essentially looking at and hearing right now together.
Yeah.
All
I'm
these
I'm
layers coexist together.
yeah. It's becoming obvious to me that you're not a three-dimensional thinker. You're a higher conscious thinker, and just like many of us. And I think Earth, or whatever creatures that we perceive to be, is going through an ascension of entry into a higher conscious thinking sphere. How do you see this ascension process that we seem to be going through? How do you feel that is going to unfold for us?
Well, we now have international instantaneous digital medium, so we can
Yeah,
watch each other like we're able to watch this. But of course, everybody's watching something different. But if we watch the watching, if we notice the noticing, become aware of awareness of this as this mirror-like awakeness, as in the groups I've been doing with tens of thousands of people internationally for over 40 years, we can actually share a commonly sensed intelligence in a fully heartfelt, embodied way as a group or as a humanity on this planet. But we're a long way from successfully popularizing at this point. So I've worked in the fields of science, all the fields of science, biology, neuroscience, physics, etc. And I've worked in filmmaking. I went to filmmaking school. I've been doing these groups, which are experiential. It's not an intellectual thing. It's something that we can engage with as pure light, as that which glows and emanates and is omnipresent, like the air in this room and in each one of our rooms right now. The air becomes visible to us. It's like the air becomes the aliveness that we feel in every cell and atom and molecule in our bodies, and it's omnipresent and omnipotent. It's what we've called as an all-loving God. And I would say there's plenty of room for highly enlightened, godlike beings to be contributing and helping us right now in this very moment wake up together, as well as extraterrestrials who are already awake and aware. They're helping humanity here on planet Earth to wake up, but they don't want to take away the pain and the suffering and the misery, because that gives us an opportunity to learn individually and collectively how much we want to wake up, what we need to do to wake up together. So the pain and suffering and misery of being human, which I feel and experience, I'm not separate from that, but because I am the nothingness, I can allow it to come and go and be incomparably unique every moment, and I don't feel torn by it and chopped up by it, unless people around me are all screaming and yelling and blaming it all on me. Who was it that said that? That I think that was Rudyard Kipling. We all learned that in high school. When my son, when you are able, said Rudyard Kipling, he was tortured by his environment in India. People all blamed and treated him as he was horrible and terrible, when he was one of the few all loving, enlightened, awakening people in his milieu. He wrote in this beautiful poem, he said, "My son, when everyone around you is screaming and yelling and blaming it on you, and you can accept that and learn from it, you have gained the world, my son." So that's what we're all challenged with, really. We may be, our body, our heart, our mind might be screaming at us like, "Oh my God, I feel terrible and horrible. How can you do this to me? Who did this to me? How did I ever get here? This is horrible." That your mind, heart, and body could be doing all that, and you can know that that's just your body, heart, and mind having those reactions to not being fully integrated. And only by being in meditative unity consciousness, where you feel you unite your body, heart, and mind as an indivisible whole, can one, in my experience, with thousands of others, tens of thousands of others, actually find freedom from suffering, absolute freedom from suffering.
Yeah, that's all in the mind too. So the suffering, in fact, in a mind-created universe, it's all mind. So it all depends on what we allow to dwell in our mind, doesn't it? And then again, extended from that, then we have this physicist, James Gates. He says that if we look deep in the equations that explains the fabric of space, we find computer language. We didn't put it there, but it shows up. So are we living in a holographically projected universe to create our perception? Or is it just,
yeah, I've been hearing this kind of thing and studying it and so forth for decades. And the word projection implies that extraterrestrials or some other entities are artificially projecting this universe that we imagine we're in, and the whole thing is an artificial construction. And there's some, in a sense, that would, with very, 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 very advanced technology, that is conceivable. Yet, the thing is that the void cannot be divided, and so it is uniting what appears to be spatially and emotionally and temporally separated in space over time, and reuniting it and representing it and regenerating it and representing it to what can be observed, what can be felt and shared by all of us. And so in that sense, we are generating this simulation. right here, right now, without anybody else tricking us and making a projection, a simulation, and then inventing us and sticking us in here, which would be a kind of a victim kind of concept.
Yeah.
So,
And I've had deep discussions with people on this. And now, if we are creating it, in what format do we create it? Is it holographic, or is it another form of fluid expression of our consciousness?
well, we know from a hologram from, was it Gabor, that what happens in a hologram, if you're going to create a hologram artificially in a computer, you have to, it's almost impossible for a computer to do this, because every single point represented visually, kinesthetically,
Everything.
or whatever, everything has to be encoded in that formula to, so that every point in the hologram can access in some unique way the experience of being in that hologram. And the computational requirements of that are limitless. It's virtually, you can't do it in a computer. You've got to have the void, which is indivisible, as I keep saying. You have to have that which is indivisible to unite all that can be divided. The exception is that everything that can be divided, being reunited at and through every single indivisible coordinate location in 3D, in this case in 3D or 5D or 6D or 8D, it's all the same all the way up. That's how all these dimensions are interrelated, is that it just becomes more comprehensive. You're able to receive and represent uniquely, not only individually, but indivisibly together, what it is that we appear to be at the level of, of whatever it is we're experiencing in any given moment. At every level, it's more complex and more refined, but essentially the same mechanism. It's not a mechanism, it's just beyond any mechanism. It's non-mechanical. The indivisibility of the void, without any effort, without need of any energy or any intention, is reuniting and relocalizing everything that can occur through. It's not at every point, but through every point. It's like the horn of plenty. It's like through every dimensionless point, the unfoldment of the recreation of creation is being represented to the observer through that point, and the observer is that point. And there can be an infinite number of points which are at one level in the fourth dimension of space, the same point. That's why we can have collective unity consciousness and share a commonly sensed body, heart, and mind on this planet, spread out around the surface of this planet, without any lifting a pinky finger.
Yeah.
Now, you know that the Earth, for example, take the whole Earth, you know how gigantically massive and heavy the whole Earth is? But you look at it and you see, in the context of the sun and the Mercury, the Mars and Venus and Jupiter and Saturn, our whole phenomena here locally is actually literally suspended weightlessly right this moment. There's no weight to the Earth at this other level. That which is weightless is uniting everything that has weight. Everything that has mind is united by no mind. Everything that is considered a self is being localized and represented by that which is not a self. This goes back 10,000 years that I know of in Hinduism. I'll say, and anybody can reference this. There are many different points of view in Hinduism, of course. But the Hindus said that the origins of existence come from what they called Sat Purusha. They would call Sat Guru, the supreme guru, or there could be many supreme gurus who know the truth. And they say, when you know the truth sets you free. So Satguru, Satpurusha in Hinduism, going back a couple thousand years at least, says that that supreme pure void, that Satpurusha, becomes what is called Purusha, which is a void which can collapse into cause and effect. And I write about this in my second paper that I presented at UC Berkeley to the Foundations of Mind Conference 2, and published in a major journal, published in Australia. Anybody can go and look at that. It goes into all of this in great depth and detail. So, to present something at UC Berkeley, I mean, you've got to have your P's and Q's together because they're going to tear you apart otherwise. So I have presented this or written this up and presented it through the Foundations of Mind Conference at UC Berkeley. This was before I even met James Beekler, who I've been working with for 8 years.
Yeah. I wonder though, where can people get their hands on these papers? Now you have a book also. We're getting down towards the end here. So where can they find those publications and can get their hands on them?
Well, there's supposed to be a link that you can buy this 200+ page full color e-magazine that I published with with Karen Elkins in Science Sage. She said, you know, Sperry, your work is so incredible. I've never done a publication with just about one person's life's work, but your work is so amazing. I just want to do the whole publication on your work. And she did. We spent 3 months working on it together. It was very challenging to do so. She picked out all these pictures and we chose them, and I picked out some, and we explained everything that I'm talking about in that e-magazine, which you can get for $3.95 or something like that in the underneath here under this YouTube. I think it's offered.
Yeah, we'll put that in the text below here, so make sure it's available.
Yeah, thank you, Aage. So yeah, I would love nothing more than all of us to read and contemplate this way of understanding, because we can feel this spiritually, but understanding it conceptually and emotionally, we have to come up with ways of understanding why we are the way we are, as you've been asking me, and how that we can be incomparably unique every moment. How can we actually see how that's happening, such that it's easier for us to see it and experience it together?
That's why I'm suggesting very highly that I think if you listen to all of this, you'll find out that this is not 3-dimensional or 4-dimensional education. It's higher. So 6, 7, 8-dimensional information. That's probably why you should go get your hands on that publication, which will be below in a little while.
Well, in that, you'll find that you can go to my institute's website that has been there for at least 30 years, I'd say. Connection Institute, where connection and institute are all one word. There's no spaces. It's connectioninstitute.org. And that'll take you there, but it's going to be a little bit overwhelming, because the reason I created that is because many scientists were always asking me for reprints of our publications and other related publications. And that was costing me thousands of dollars every year. So I just made all those publications available to everybody to print for themselves from my institute's website. So you can go there, you can download it, all it's all free. Everything I've ever done for free, all the groups I've done for 40 years have all basically been free. Sometimes people forced me to take money. I say, I don't want the money. They say, you're going to take this money or I'm going to put it in your pocket. Shut up.
Yeah.
So I have made this available for free. I now have a number of movies. I have a whole 5-year multimedia project to successfully awaken and enlighten humanity through bringing people into unity consciousness who are watching the movie. So the people on screen in an ensemble cast of men and women who are in unity consciousness, who have established themselves there, can look through the camera and ask audiences, 200-300 people in a theater, for example, or wherever, and notice what they're noticing together. They're asking people in the audience, do you sense what we're sensing and feeling and sharing on screen with each other here in a pre-recorded medium? Can you feel it with the person to your right or to your left, in front of you or in back of you? And eventually over 60 to 90 to 120 minutes, you get 200 or 300 people into a shared sensitivity where they're being awake as one body, heart, and mind as 300
Yeah.
people. And I've experienced this. And when they do, when they leave the theater, they all look at each other. They look into each other's eyes and they say, typically, it feels like this total stranger. I feel like I've known them my whole life. And in my groups I've
Yeah.
done internationally, we experience that. We have past life experiences that we re-experience together. And it's absolutely gorgeous and magnificent. So this is what is possible.
That's
This is what is
wonderful.
possible now.
Yeah. Repeat that website that you have again.
That's Connection Institute. Connection is singular, and Connection and Institute are a single word. There's no space. .org. Connectioninstitute.org.
All right, that sounds good. So we need to go there and have a look because we're out of time. So thank you very much, Sperry, for being with me again. And chances are we might do something similar, Tom, if I can talk you into it later on.
Beautiful. Well, I just
Yeah.
love your Aage. You're the most peaceful and calm person. I apologize for getting so intense because I tried to bring it all together and say it, put it into words somehow. It's very
Oh, that's
challenging.
good. That's good.
But deep down, I'm completely peaceful and there's no division. So it's amazing
Yeah.
to experience that
All
I'm
right.
both ways.
Well, thank you very much. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And we will be back next week. And until then, be good to each other.